I hope everybody in class ate their Wheaties because the content in this section is fatter than me in an all-you-can-eat Italian buffet. I mean, it is fat. However, the topic is hugely important to our story. How we got our Constitution. It's going to require 2 pretty intensive days to get to the bottom of the story. And if you were absent, I started class with a general question, an open question. What do you know about the Constitution? Now, obviously, the people who've taken government class know more than the people who have not taken government class. I just wanted to pick your brains to see where you were at before we move forward. And then we got right into the content. Now, the Articles of Confederation, that's not the Constitution, but it's our first attempt at running ourselves. And you can see it didn't last very long, 1781 to 1787. Now, it didn't work out for several reasons. Congress had no power to levy or collect taxes. Congress had no power to regulate foreign trade. Congress had no power to enforce its laws. Approval of 9 states was needed to enact laws. 13 states needed to approve amendments to the Articles. That means one state could gum it up for everybody else if they wanted to be a pain in the backside. The government had no executive branch, and there was no national court system. However, the way I look at this is that reflective people learn from their mistakes and get better after a mistake. That is the hope, and America certainly did. That is for sure. And the Annapolis Convention was an attempt to fix things. Now, 1786 is about a year before they scrapped it, and it didn't work out. I mean, there was no quorum. There wasn't enough people to really do anything about it. However, it did give people a chance to talk, and that's a good thing. And these talks led to a meeting in Philadelphia in May of 1787, and things went a lot better than the Annapolis Convention, okay? This was the Constitutional Convention. Now, this painting here by Howard Chandler Christie may be the most famous painting in U.S. history. Now, if you were absent, go to Google Classroom, and we dug into this just for a little bit, and you're going to see a couple of worksheets, and you can see here's a copy of the worksheet. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through it in this video. Here are all the people who were there at the signing of the Constitution. And here's the fact sheet, if you are so inclined. Just interesting, nothing of, huge importance on your test come springtime. It's just interesting, and we looked at that. So once we broke down the Christie painting a little bit, we moved on into the Constitution. Now, do me a favor, and I have adults that do this, and it really grinds my gears. That's an old guy expression. It grinds my gears. This is not the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was July 4th, 1776. Okay, that was, hey, England, here's our issues with you. We have a problem in Revolutionary War. Okay, so this is more than a decade removed from the Constitution. So please don't be that person that confuses the Declaration of Independence with the Constitution. Just don't be that person. Okay, little public service announcement for you all. Okay, moving on. So the Virginia Plan. This was the first proposal put forward at the Constitutional Convention. Bear in mind, Virginia was a major player. Lots of people, lots of power. And what they wanted was 2 houses of Congress, both elected by proportional representation and a national executive and judiciary. Did not work out, but they fired the first shot. Now you see this term proportional representation. What is that? This is a way of selecting representatives in Congress based on the total population of a state, as opposed to having each state receive equal votes. Obviously, if you're a big state, you're cool with this. If you're a little state, you're not so thrilled about this, but that's proportional representation. Now, another big idea in the Constitution, this is a brilliant idea, is separation of powers. Now, this is a core aspect of the Constitution by which different parts of the new national government would have their authorities always limited by other parts. 3 branches, checking each other's power so we don't have one aspect of our government be all powerful. Beautiful idea, and it's still with us today, thank goodness. Okay, federalism. Federalism is a system of government in which power is clearly divided between state governments and the national and or federal government. So federal laws, right now would be the U.S. Army, the U.S. Post Office, okay? There are some things at a federal level, okay? Weights and measures and foreign policy with other nations. Now, there are some things that reside at the state level. My fishing license, my hunting license, that sort of thing. And then there's certain aspects which are shared. Now, this idea eventually became our 10th Amendment of our Constitution, which is a brilliant amendment because Power is at different levels, okay? How many dogs I can own in my town should not be at the federal level. It's a local level. How many fish I can catch in the summertime is a state thing. The military, I don't want a Michigan Army. I want a U.S. Army, okay, if you follow me. So that's federalism. Now, the New Jersey plan was a proposal of the New Jersey delegation to the Constitutional Convention by which both houses of Congress would be elected by states with equal-sized delegations for every state. So you see this divide. Little visual here. Virginia is really big. They want proportional representation. New Jersey is smaller. They want equal for everybody. Obviously, these two sides are not going to see eye to eye unless somebody comes up with a compromise. Oh, yeah, there you go. And here it is, the compromise, otherwise known as the Connecticut Plan. Now, this plan proposed for creating a national bicameral legislature in which all states would be equally represented in the Senate and proportionally represented in the House. And this is what we have today. Every state, even a small population state like Wyoming, they get two. Just like California, this enormous population, they have two. However, the House members are based on proportional representation. So both sides got what they wanted, and this was the brilliance of the Constitutional Convention, to work together to have this compromise. And they also came up with this idea called the Electoral College that's been receiving a lot of heat in recent years, and your government teacher will have a field day with you with this. I think every government teacher spends a week or two on this topic because it's interesting. But this is a system in which each state selects presidential electors according to the number of its senators and representatives in Congress by whatever method it prefers. And these electors then select the president. Okay, and when we get to the very end of the class, we'll see how this played in the election of 2020. And that was a big hullabaloo, but we'll get into that come springtime. Now, this compromise is less cool. The Connecticut plan, pretty cool. 3/5 clause is going to probably leave you with a little sick feeling in your stomach, and I don't blame you. So there's a compromise from the Constitutional Convention by which slaves, though the term was never used, would be counted as 3/5 of a human being for the purpose of establishing a state's representation under the proportional representation plan. And I don't think any of my students would like to be thought of as 3/5 of a human being. And I think you're all whole human beings, okay? However, the states that relied on slavery didn't quite see it. So some states, I know this is going to be a little uncomfortable, said, oh, these people are actual human beings. And some of the southern states said, no, they should count for 0. And this was the compromise. And yeah, anyway, it is what it is, right? And then the last term for day one, Federalists versus anti-Federalists. And this divide, you can still see it today in Republicans and Democrats, people who are more for federal rule, some are more for state rule. But at the time, we had Federalists, supporters of the Constitution, those who favored its ratification. Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, they were the heavy hitters on one side. And then we had the anti-Federalists. These were opponents of the Constitution, those who argued against its ratification. Their heavy hitters were Mason, Henry, and Adams. So these two sides had to find some compromise to agree on that Constitution. And this compromise and this willingness to work with the other side is at the root of the American Constitution. I would argue it's the root of American politics the way it ought to be. Not the way it actually is, but the way it ought to be. But you all know the way things ought to be and the way things actually are two very different things. I digress. So anyway, we'll move on to more material for day 2, but that ends day 1. And just to wrap things up, where is the assignment? I'm going to Google Classroom. Okay, there we go. Google Classroom, Classroom. Here we go. APUS, classwork. This was day 25. And if you go to Google Classroom, you will see day 1 assignment. Please complete that at the end. And this constitutional scene and this constitutional fact sheet was also used in class. And you can see these other rectangles will be for the following class. So that's what we did, and I appreciate you watching.